David Kelley was working unhappily as an electrical engineer when he first heard about Stanford's cross-disciplinary joint program in design, which had merged engineering and art. What he learned there, a human-centered, team-based approach to tackling sticky problems through design, propelled his professional life as a design thinker. In 1978, David Kelley co-founded the firm that ultimately became the award-winning global design firm IDEO. IDEO created many icons of the digital generation. The first mouse for Apple, the first Trio, remember those? The thumbs up, thumbs down button on your TiVo's remote control. But what matters even more to him is unlocking the creative potential of people and organizations so that they can innovate routinely. In his new book, Creative Confidence, he advises that creativity is about believing in your ability to make change in the world around you. It is the conviction that you can achieve what you set out to do, and that this self-assurance, this belief in your creative capacity, lies at the heart of innovation. David's most enduring contributions to the field of design are a human-centered methodology and culture of innovation. More recently, he led the creation of the groundbreaking D School at Stanford, the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design. Today, David Kelley serves as the chair of IDEO and is the Donald W. Whittier Professor at Stanford, where he has taught for more than 25 years. He's here tonight with his new book, Creative Confidence, in conversation with Douglas McGray, the editor-in-chief of the California Sunday Magazine and Pop-Up Magazine, the thing to which I wish I could get a ticket, but they're always sold out. Following David and Doug's conversation, they will be happy to take your questions. Our good friends at Green Apple Books will have copies of Creative Confidence for purchase in the atrium following the event, and David will be available to autograph them. Tonight's event is available as a live webcast on the JCCSF webcast at jccsf.org/live, and will be rebroadcast on our KALW public radio show, BINA, in the weeks to come, so check their schedule. Please join me, ladies and gentlemen, in welcoming David Kelley and Douglas McGray to the JCCSF.
So on page 97.
Yeah, I remember it well. You know,
you have the header begins interview techniques.
Yeah. Are you sure that's true?
I took a special interest in this page. It was actually, I'm not making this up. When I first got the book, I opened it to the middle, and I actually opened it to this page, and so I folded the corner to make sure that I didn't forget that. But what it says is actually that talking to people and interviewing is a little bit overrated.
Yeah, I think, you know, don't tell them that. I think they paid to come in. We're here. Yeah, we use lots of interviews. I mean, interviews are enlightening, but we're trying to uncover non-obvious needs that people have and then satisfy them. It's the way we innovate, right? As we try to understand what's meaningful to people. And if you ask people that their responses are so full of their filter, you know, it's like you're really talking to their representative, not to them. You know, they're in their whatever, they're putting their best foot forward, so to speak, whatever they think that is. And we're trying to get behind that, right? So observation is much more enlightening. If you watch somebody like, if we're trying to help somebody improve a piece of software, if you watch them, and it's a new piece of software, right? So they're grimacing most of the time that they're using and they're having trouble. And then you ask them, you know, how was it? they say, "Oh, it's great," or "It's fine," right? Because they're they're trying to show you that they were, smart enough to be able to figure it out, right, or something. But all you really have to do, if you watch those grimaces and then just record those and match the software to that, it was that, it's that thing. But my first time was that when we kind of started doing this service that we call human factors. What we do we call human-centered design, but human factors is the discipline of these people who are kind of like anthropologists to do it. And I'm with one of the young anthropologists, and we're trying to help Pepsi, I think it was, design a new vending machine. We go to Japan, see how, because they're cool and they are really hip on vending machines or stuff. And we're standing there watching this person use a machine, and I'm an engineer, right? And so I'm looking at it, I can't see, and she says, "Do you think it's right that the Pepsi comes out at your ankles?" Right? Well, I never saw it. So you need to develop a way of looking that's just kind of this open-minded, way of looking. And you sit there for a while, and it was so obvious that people are like on their knees with their arms up in the machine, and you're getting a good view of their behind, as they're like. So anyway,
So maybe we should just observe you for a while.
Yeah.
You can just forget we're here.
Well, if you observe me in my habitat, if you were in my studio or you were at Stanford, you would learn a lot about me or a professor or whatever when you watch them. I think you ever had that in a restaurant and you look across the room and you see somebody and you say, "I don't know them, but I don't like them." There's some your history, your intuition has been informed by your experience in that way, and so we're actually quite good at it. My mentor Bob McKim, who started the program at Stanford, said to me a long time ago, "A fish doesn't know he's wet." And that's it sounds silly, but it's kind of profound. I realized that the stuff that's right around us, that's familiar to us, we can't see it. Right?
And was this obvious to you in the beginning when you were getting into design? It seems when you see the work, it seems to make so much sense, but this wasn't always the way people did things.
No, the design profession is really it's really gone through a transformation, which has been fabulous for us, for Stanford and IDEO, and for people that are like-minded with us. Is that design had always been kind of primarily about aesthetics and about an individual kind of thing, the talent of the artist, sort of, and that was great, and that still exists. But design has moved to what we're calling design thinking, where it's a team sport, and it's about how you routinely innovate. How do you come up with new ideas that benefit the world? And so that's really expanded our role. I'd have to say, especially at Stanford, I've been there actually 35 years, and for the first 25, I felt like I was kind of at the kids' table, and if the president of the university came down, he was coming down to say, "Where do you get shoes like that?" Or design questions, right? In that way.
Maybe a business card redesign.
Yeah, exactly. And now they're looking for designers to solve the biggest, most important problems that the university has. We're working on, K through 12 education, but we're also working on helping the university would like every Stanford student to be confident in their creative ability.
So take us back to when you started IDEO. Was this thinking in the air already, or was it set the stage? What were you seeing out there in the design world and the world of people who hired them?
Yeah, so design was, we're talking about people like Charles Eames and Raymond Loewy and people who really were talented and doing great things. But I wasn't, all things happen because of some kind of insecurity or deficiency in the person starting the thing, I think. And so I wasn't that talented, so it was hard to compete with those guys. But what I really liked doing was making raving fans of the person that, who it was designed for. So, and we started out doing things for blind people, and we started out doing things that, for like empowering nurses and stuff like that. And so it was just so, you're a nerdy engineer, and to see some human light up by something you've done was that way. But so the design profession was primarily around what at that time was called industrial design or graphic design or all those kind of things. And I certainly had, all my heroes were those kind of guys. Paul Rand is a graphic designer, and Ettore Satsas is an industrial designer. And, so I graduated from Stanford, and I was more like a hybrid engineer who appreciated design, right? And so I decided pretty early on that this was going to have to be a team sport for me, where design prior to that time was an individual sport. You could name the person who was the head of the firm. You know, you named the architect, and everybody else kind of was subordinated to that in some ways. And I didn't want that. I wanted to build the stage and let other people perform on it. And so, so when I started, I realized it was a team sport. So I wanted to bring different disciplines together and go attack the problems for that with that multidisciplinary team. And what it turned out was, it really was quite exciting how you could get to new ideas that have never been thought of before, because these talents had never been in a mashup together, right? So you take a business person and an anthropologist and a philosopher and an opera singer and find wherever you can find in that way. And if you could get them, so design thinking is this methodology that we use, and it's human enough that they would build on each other's ideas, as opposed to just fight with each other and leave in a huff, which is what was going on before in multidisciplinary things. But for some reason, this human-centered approach allowed different disciplines of people to come together, and then they started building on each other's ideas. And one would have an idea, and the other one would think, that's not a very good idea. But instead of tearing them down, which they had done before, they said, the next thing that comes out of my mind will be something that fixes the problem that I had the insight that was wrong. But you go to such, the follow the tree when you have these different disciplines together is really, really exciting, because you go to new places, you just do, right?
There are probably some people listening who don't know exactly what IDEO does, or they don't know what it's like to be in the office working on a project. Pick a project maybe that gives a sense of how you work, how you approach something, and what comes out at the end.
Yeah, so, okay, so we're in San Francisco. Let's do San Francisco Unified School District. San Francisco Unified School District hires us to look at a bunch of stuff, and we end up looking at lunch. What a great thing, lunch, for kids, right? And so you go in into the cafeteria, and the first thing you notice is that there's hundreds of kids. 53,000 lunches a day are served here. You go into this kind of gymnasium-like space, and the kids are running around screaming, and the adults are all screaming, "Shut up, be quiet!" What a dumb thing. You can't get kids. You don't put kids in a gym and then tell them to be quiet. So you can already see they got the wrong thing going, right? The wrong attitude going. Anyway, so you go in and you observe for a while, and you start to see, and pretty soon you figure out with our human factors mindset, with our, this observation and interview. So you interview everybody, all the stakeholders. You interview the principal, and you interview the people who give the food out, and the kids. And
what are those interviews like? What do you ask them?
Well, you ask them, questions that lead you to what they value. You say, what's your favorite part of lunch and stuff, and you start to see. Well, first you realize nobody's asked the kids pretty quickly, but first thing, the first thing the kids say is, I think the solution here is ice cream all the time. If you just started serving ice cream from the minute we get in here to the time we leave, that would be perfect. Right?
I'm not sure they're wrong.
Yeah, right. Anyway, so you interview all the stakeholders, and then you watch, and pretty soon you realize, we call this need finding, and the act of figuring out what's worth working on is wildly, in my opinion, more creative than the actual problem solving, because we always talk about problem solving. But I think, especially as the US, we're very good at problem solving, but not so good at what problem is worth working on. So if you watch kids at lunch, pretty quickly you realize lunch is not about food for them. Lunch is about socialization. You've just been on all these classes with a bunch of people, and now is a chance to be with your friends, because they come from all over school, right? I can be with my friends. And so you waste a lot of time standing in line, getting your food and stuff, and it's not about food for them. So now you realize that you want to design an extraordinary experience for them about being with their friends, not an extraordinary experience about lunch, because they don't care about that. I mean, some large percentage of kids don't eat lunch because they want to be with their friends, they want to avoid that. Or the stigma of that they're on some food program, whatever. There's all kinds of reasons that they don't eat lunch. But anyway, so we go in there. I promise I won't make the whole evening this one discussion. And so what happens is we figure out that once you do that, then it's pretty clear what to do. Don't let them stand in line. Bring out the people from behind the counters that are serving lunch. Make lunch a kind of a family-style thing, so when the kids come in, they can sit down at a table right away and start enjoying their friendships of their friends, and then being with their friends, and then we'll have those people serve family-style. But here's the big win. Big win. We serve the fruits and vegetables first. They're hungry. There's nothing else on the table. They eat the fruits and vegetables. Like this. I mean, the federally mandated thing is you only have to get the fruits and vegetables on their plates. They don't eat them necessarily. So that's a big win. But the thing I have to say is that with this human-centered approach, you uncover all kinds of very human things. And in this case, the team's standing there and they're watching a young kid putting food in his backpack, and that's you're not allowed to do that in this public school. And so the teacher goes up and says, I'm sorry, what do you do when you can't? And he says, my mother's hungry. So it's really cool. So now we have a project which is, dinners that in the federally thing where dinners you can take home. We haven't done this yet, but I mean, the idea is that there's a bunch of these brown boxes that if you kind of, either you pay for it or you're eligible from some federal thing that you can take food home to the family at night. So it's pretty exciting.
And you would think if you hear about a project like that, you would think it's nothing like designing a product or working with Apple or any of these other things. But it's a similar methodology.
It's exactly the same. You try to understand what people value, what's a need that people really have. And then what you do is you just prototype. I mean, our methodology is really what we call bias towards action, which is not, there's not a lot of planning and sitting around. Those meetings where you sit in the room with everybody's got their laptops open and it just lasts forever and you don't seem to get anything done and then you come back and do that again next week. We just don't think that's high value. Eventually, planning's good, but only after you've really kind of understand what the issues are. And so whether it's designing a computer or a wastebasket or, we're doing a lot in K-12 education, the way to succeed and the way to kind of get the kind of best ideas is to paint a picture of the future with your idea. However half-baked or however crazy it is, you paint a picture of the future with that in, through models or some kind of prototype or making a video, whatever. And then, as humans, we're really good at telling people what's wrong with their idea, right? So you just use that human trait and you start showing it to everybody you can. I think the cars are going to come to your house and pick you up rather than you driving them, or whatever your idea is. And you make that tangible, so visual, so they can tell. That's the design part. And then they tell you what's wrong with it, and you take copious notes, and then you decide whether they're right or not, and what they do, and you make another prototype, and you make another prototype. I'll tell you one of my best stories about this was kindergartners. So we're working with kindergartners, and we just give them a project. It's all about project-based learning, so it's that they have a project, and then we can get all the content, whether it's math or whatever it is. We can, once we get them hooked on the project, we can teach them anything. And so we're asking them kindergartners. We're asking them to design their bedroom, and so they make little cardboard models and they bring them in. They're super cute and fun.
So you bring in art supplies and stuff.
Yeah, we just fill the room with. There's a place in San Jose called Raft that has just junk that for school teachers. We just fill the room with stuff and they go. Anyway, and so, but the trick there is to give them the educational part is to give, nobody seems to have time for this, but it's to give the same project over and over again because you're becoming more expert. You've seen what the other kids in the class is doing. And we call this guided mastery, where we hold your hand and we make you successful over and over again, and pretty soon you own your creativity, right? And so the long story, but the girl, one of the girls brings in this thing. She's got this big space next to her bed, and this thing. I'm like, what's this? And she said, well, in my interviews, I figured out that my big problem is that when we come home late, Dad has to carry me all the way from the garage to my bed. So in my bedroom, there's a place where the family car pulls right up next to my bed. You open the door, and I roll out into the bed. So these kids are not stupid. So in the next round, every kid in the class had that as I think that's called the dominant design.
Did you grow up in a creative household? Were you a creative little kid?
No, not particularly. I grew up in Ohio in a working class family. Nothing kind of ever happened. Very traditional. But I'd say, in the book we dedicate the book to my parents. And I think what they did was allow us. They didn't discourage us. It was like benign neglect or something. I don't know. But, they would know where we were. Like before bedtime, but they had no idea where we were the rest of the day. Anyway, so that freedom, I think. There was nobody saying you can't do that, or that won't work, or don't do that. There was none of that. So my mother tells lots of stories about how stuff like the piano got taken apart but never put back together.
Yeah, you mentioned in the book that you shared a room with your brother for 14 years. It seemed to me that might be good preparation for writing a book with him.
Yeah, I think the book might be the hardest thing we ever did together, to tell you the truth. Yeah. I'm very close to my brother. It's a lovely thing. He works in the company, so if you're the CEO of the company or the founder of the company, it's really nice when you leave that your brother's still there, to make sure things still happen. But when 2000, I talk about in the book, in 2007, I was diagnosed with throat cancer. And, it was pretty nasty. I mean, they said I had 40% chance to live or something. And it was, I lost 50 pounds, and it was a big mess. And so, the end of that story is I survived. Just so see a little bit. I'll skip. I'll skip to the end there. But anyway, so my brother was there basically every day for me. And so when it was clear that I was going to survive, we decided we would do something. We would do something overt, rather, because we kind of divide and conquer and weren't doing many things together in the company. So we decided we would travel together and we'd do a project together. So we traveled. It was lovely, mostly in Japan, and just two of us, and it was lovely. Right after I got over the cancer stuff, and then the project we decided to do was the book. And so that book is our jointly thing. He's much more of a writer than I am. I'm more of a kind of I'd rather build the Taj Mahal out of toothpicks than to write a paragraph. But we would get in the morning and we'd like brainstorm, and I do these things called mind maps. It's like it's like the equivalent of a list for a kind of a creative person, and so I make these mind maps.
What does it look like?
It looks like a tree. It looks like a diagram. You take the basis premise that you're trying to work on, chapter 7's whatever title or whatever is, and then you start going out and recording like the ideas you have going out from the center, and you draw them little bubbles and stuff. What happens is that all those ideas that you have like off the top of your head in the first kind of half hour are all very cliched, and anybody could come up with them. But what you do is you force yourself, given that inspiration of that branch of the tree, to push yourself further. You keep asking yourself why, what it says, they say why, and you just keep going further out. And you eventually get to, each of the branches away from the center, you get to a place that you hadn't been before in your own mind, right? And that's powerful about it. So we would do that, and then he would convert those to ideas, and then and then write them, basically.
And when you were doing this, I'm sure it reflected a lot of the idea generation that you would have at IDEO.
They look just like normal IDEO boards on any subject. Yeah.
But then the thing I was curious about is you've been brothers longer, obviously. Were there ways and were there times that broke the system down? That sort of being brothers, you had to alter the way you do things a bit.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is about brothers in that situation, you accept them, you accept each other for what you are, dysfunction and all, right? So one of the problems I have in life is somebody I don't like the way they do something, every time it's like a movie, and every time they enter the screen, I punish them for them being who they are, right? I mean, like, this is the evil guy. You know he's the evil guy. Why are you upset that he's the evil guy? He's already been cast as the evil guy, right? So, so that's hard because you kind of, well, with in the case of brothers in this case, we know each other's weaknesses. So you just, like I can see something coming that he's going to start being down in the mouth about, and I just like drive by that on purpose. Go some other place. So, yeah, it's a very positive thing if you can get that positive thing going. I assume it's. Any place where there's that much emotion, it could spiral down the other way just as easily, but we didn't have that situation. But partly it has to do with working so long, and I'm the older brother, so like he's probably better at compromise than I am.
If you're writing a book about creativity, it's a big challenge. And one of the points that you make in the book is that people have a pretty wrong idea about what creativity is and how it works. I mean, what's the vision of creativity that you want people to take away?
Well, the main thing the book's about is that trying to convince everybody that they're wildly creative. When I started the D School at Stanford, I thought we might have to teach creativity. And every year, 800 students come through the place, and it's been going since 2005. Turns out we just have to unblock the things that are in their way. They're still wildly creative. What happens is, from our research, is that sometime about 9 years old, when you start being aware that other people are noticing, before that, you're completely open loop. I love kids where, like there's no fear, no concern about what other people think. You just scream loudly at, whatever you want to, right? And so at some point, though, somebody convinces them that they're not creative and they opt out of creativity.
And why do you think it takes at that age? What is it that makes that message stick at that point?
I think because they're starting to be self-aware and they're looking for who they are, and you tell them you can't play the piano, even though, you can't walk up to the piano and play it for the first time, but I think it's tied, I don't know this for sure, I haven't studied this exactly, but it has something to do with art. Like, they're saying you're not artistic, which is probably true. And the kid takes that as you're not creative, and then they opt out of it, right? And then they go in a path where since they opt out of it, they don't do it, they don't try. And by the time they get to me in college, it's pretty ingrained that I'm an analytical person, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm an engineer, I'm not a creative person. In fact, ad agency do us a real disservice by saying they divide the company into the creatives and the not creatives. That's not helping. What we find though is if you can get somebody and you can through projects you can get them to see, we call this guided mastery, and we give them a small project and we help them be successful, and then a bigger one, and then a team project, and we just up the complexity, and eventually they say, oh my God, I'm a creative person, or my team's a creative thing. So the way I got on this was, there's a professor at Stanford called Albert Bandura. If you're a psychology major, you know who the hell Albert Bandura is. Bandura, if you look at Wikipedia, they say Bandura is the fourth most important psychologist in history. Freud, Skinner, Bandura there. And so he believes that this guided mastery is the way to to stop people's fears. So his research is like snake phobias and spider phobias and stuff, and he holds the people's hands, takes them through a lot of small things, and he basically can move these people from not going outside because there might be a snake out there to being totally cured. in a very short period of time. And it's exactly what we do. It's like, I'm dealing with the fear of being judged. Mostly people don't do creative things or live creative lives because they're afraid of being judged, right? He's got the fear of snakes, I mean, pretty tangible. But his success, he shows how once they've broken this fear and they've moved to what he calls self-efficacy, which is similar to creative confidence, it changes everything in their life. They have more stick to it. They make better decisions about what they need to do in life. They kind of in the face of failure, they're more resilient. It's pretty cathartic, and we see that in the students over and over again, that once you've broken that I'm not creative into this confident place of self-efficacy, it changes a lot in their life. They change professions, and they change their direction, and they make a pivot in their lives.
And when did you start?
I sound like Tony Robbins sometimes.
When did you start thinking about this? Was it working with people at IDEO? Was it working with clients? Was it later at the university?
To tell you the truth, the way I got to this was I was watching people who were insecure. There were people who were high performers. I mean, we were talking about this backstage. You've got a new venture and trying to understand how to hire people and like hiring the right people and empowering them and stuff. And I noticed that people who were perfectly, effective at what they were doing, if something in the culture made them insecure, they started to act badly. I mean, that insecurity caused them to do things that if you looked at, they were actually bad for them and the company. It's like the football game where a guy punches a guy and then he turns around and hits him and they catch the second guy punching him, And so I was trying to understand why this being insecure was so debilitating, right? And so if you go there, then you start to understand the confident. And you look at overly confident people. And so I was in this thing of the tension between being insecure and being overly confident, right? And so that's how the term creative confidence came up, was watching that. And then I realized that it applied to everything we did, that not just the employees, but the clients and my students and everybody.
Mm-hmm. You give some tips in the book, and some of them I think would be hard for people at first. You talk about being sloppy and making a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Talk about that at IDEO. When did you? How does that factor into the work?
Yeah. Well, this notion, I love these things that say, you should learn to fail. Fail's good. I'm thinking, whoa, we don't want to fail, especially at the end. I mean, you might want to fail at the beginning a little bit, but failing at the end, ooh, that's not good. And it reminds me so I have a good friend named John Cassidy. We call him Cass, and he started a company called Klutz Press. You remember Klutz Press, mm-hmm. right? Klutz Press. If you have kids, you probably bought, a book that has, face paint tied to it or something. Anyways, so John, when he started out, was his first book was called Juggling for the Complete Klutz. That was his first book. And it's a funny story because he thought he was in the juggling business, so his next 5 books were unsuccessful because they were about juggling. And then he figured out he was in the book business, and wild success, sold to Scholastic and stuff. But in his book, Juggling for the Complete Klutz, he figured out that the whole problem with juggling was about confidence. It was about your fear that the ball was going to hit the floor was debilitating. You know that there's no consequence to the ball hitting the floor, yet your brain can't shut off that that's a horrible thing. The ball dropping is not good. I have my phobia about missing the plane at the airport. I like flying, but there's no consequence. I just take the next plane, but my brain won't shut off torturing me about how I'm going to be late for the plane. Anyways, but this. I usually call these bird walks, where I walk off into something that has nothing to do with the talk. I'm sorry. And you'll have to bring me back. I think we're talking about
juggling and hitting the floor.
Anyway, and so it turns out that once you spend enough time dropping the ball and desensitizing your brain to dropping the ball, you can juggle easily. I mean, really easily. It's really interesting to watch how that happens. And it's great, because you can impress the girls at parties, pick up the oranges, but anyways, but that's kind of what that's the essence of what it is that that fear of dropping the ball, that fear of being judged by others, right? And so if you have a culture like IDEO where that's celebrated, I mean, IDEO celebrates how risk-taking can you be and not get caught, you know, like how you know, when you're supposed to do a certain job, how like extreme can you do it? How extraordinarily can you do it, you know, without, I don't mean like getting caught by the boss, there's not, but I mean like within the constraints of what's reasonable or sustainable in the world, right? Can you do that? And so the world's kind of, the present world is like, people are trying to kind of stay in the middle mostly and not take a risk, and we should be punishing that inactivity. That's what's kind of grind the whole thing to a halt. And we should be rewarding people who are, you know, trying stuff with, you know, not just wild stuff, but that are pushing stuff. And so I spend a lot of time with CEOs and trying to get the bosses of these companies, instead of when a young designer, a young you know, marketing person gets to see the boss, the CEO, they polish their things to the, you know, like they try to make it perfect, you know, stuff. And then the boss can only say this is yes or no, right? Whereas, so that's the boss's problem, not the person's problem. So you got to get the bosses to expect kind of half-baked, multiple, show me 3 ideas, you know, one completely crazy, you know, like show me a bunch of stuff, and I'll help you kind of navigate what you should spend your time on in the next round. So we can really make a lot of progress if we can get the boss, instead of like one big cycle where you show the boss your final product, or the users for that matter, not just the boss, right, the customers, that you show a bunch of kind of half-baked ideas and iterate. So we show the idea, we improve upon it, improve upon it, improve upon it, improve upon it. So in a culture where the senior manager of the management of the company is looking for this iterative, you know, improvement through iteration in short bursts rather than one long cycle, seems to be the way that correlates, that allows this kind of stuff to happen. You have to be open-minded as well, but that seems to be the key.
One tool that you mentioned is bringing a marker into the shower. I'm not sure that would fly at every household.
This is not a pretty picture. but yeah, no, so this is a concept called relaxed attention. It turns out that seems like you have your best ideas, not when you're asleep. I mean, I know you should, you know, my brother thinks you wake up in the morning and you write your best ideas down. I think that's a possibility for some people. We only have our own experience, but my belief is this relaxed attention. When you're not like trying real hard, but what you're not asleep, but you're paying attention. You know, that state, it's kind of I'm sure there's something in Buddhism that, I just don't know Buddhism, but I mean, I'm sure there's something in it that relates to it. But in that moment. So for me, I seem to have my best ideas in the shower. So I have a big, you know, whiteboard in my shower where I write the stuff down. The sad part of this is sometimes I forget and I have to send my secretary back to my shower to like copy down what I wrote earlier this morning. Right?
The other tool, the work seems to involve a lot of Post-its. We should
get some kickback from 3M, I think.
There's a scene in the book where there are 4 IDEO people in a car, and they're either about to run out of Post-its or they've run out of Post-its, and it kind of takes on the quality of being in the desert and running out of food and water.
Yeah.
What will happen next?
Yeah.
Explain the Post-its.
Yeah. So our way of coming up with ideas is collaborative, and as I said, it's a team sport. So how do you So the opposite of this is one person speaks and they say they're all their ideas, and then the next person speaks and the next person. That's not a build on each other's ideas kind of frame. So how do you, when it's all happening at the same time, how do you orchestrate that? And we do that with Post-its. So I have an idea, you're talking about your idea, I write my idea on a Post-it so I don't forget it. And then when there's a break in the action, I haven't forgotten it, and it's not exactly my turn, but there's a break in the action, so I can then get my Post-it out and put it out. So it's a way of recording asynchronously like your ideas, so that in the fray of everybody coming up with ideas, it's the placeholder so that, you know, that it can happen. So when you watch this pretty interesting ballet, because people have different personality types and different quality ideas, and so it's it's just the way that we get all the ideas. I think Linus Pauling said, if you want a good idea, have lots of ideas. And so it's a way to flood the subject with ideas without slowing down the pace. Somehow, if you have a culture where somebody in the group gets rewarded for being so smart as to tell you what's wrong with the idea, then that kind of slows the train down, right? The whole process. So, and a lot of cultures are like that, where somebody says an idea that's kind of half-baked, and the other person says, that's not going to work because this won't work. This is up, and there's not that many, right? And that's just not helpful, right? I mean, it may be true, but it's not helpful. And so, so the whole markers and Post-its, and at the D School or IDEO, you can't walk 15 feet without finding a box full of Post-its and a Sharpie, because that's the way we work. Oh, the other thing about that is that now you have this board. We put it on these big boards, and now when the brainstorm's over and stuff, you walk off with the board and you have all the ideas written down, as opposed to in a verbal thing, something gets lost. So the writing them down and drawing little pictures on the Post-it notes is also a way to record them, because we want to go back and, because you go down this path and it doesn't work, you want, what other ideas do we have, right? And they're right there, they're recorded.
And so at the D School, it's a whole educational initiative built up around these sorts of ideas. Explain a little bit how it works there. Maybe
Sure.
Talk about a class. I heard there was a class that's actually about Stanford, which I think is totally fascinating.
At Stanford, yeah. There's a class on Carol Shorenstein Hayes funded The Future of Theater. We did that last quarter. And the classes are all over. I don't actually care what the classes are. I'm trying to teach the students to be mindful of process and to be creatively confident. And so I just try to feed them projects that turn them on, and then we can teach them. Once you're working on a project you care about, then it's easier to learn the things. But so the D School is an interesting place because it's an opt-in culture. The reason it's taken off is that everybody's there because they want to be. It's hard to understand that if you're a university professor and I teach required classes and people are there because they have to be, that's a completely different thing. And at the D School, there's none of those. I don't pay the professors. So and then there's 50 of them or 100 of them, Stanford professors that are world class or whatever they do, but they come there because of the students, because that excitement of those students being turned on in the way they do. So if they want to come, they either have to overload the class or they have to get their department to say, this is one of your classes now, which was hard in the beginning. The students don't get degrees. Half the classes are not for credit. So everybody's there because they want to be there, right? And that's a really different educational experience. So the way a class works is just like an IDEO project where we let the students do need finding and let them pick the project. Completely different again than your project being assigned. So they go out, they look around, they do need finding, and they come back and say something in their world usually, and they say, I want to improve the experience of taking the train from Palo Alto to San Francisco. So that's their project, right? And then they recruit teams from other students. We're really lucky that hundreds of students want to take every class, and we only have room for 40 or 50 in each class. So there's a big pool to draw on. If you need a coder, or you need a mechanical engineer, or you need a business person, and they pull them all together, the team that's come up with the idea, and then they just go out and start prototyping. And we have classes where so Stanford's on quarter system, so it's 10 weeks long. We have classes like Launchpad where you have to have your idea in customers' hands in 5 weeks, halfway through the quarter.
And that's actually starting a company?
Yeah, in effect. So, and I can tell you stories, like the best iPad selling app of 2 guys that started in this class, and they just sold their company to LinkedIn for $90 million, and we have students who have built the projects that are saving 50,000 lives a year because they make this kind of incubator more like a sleeping bag that keeps babies, who have trouble maintaining their weight.
Yeah, explain that one. I thought that
Embrace?
was a really interesting project. Yeah.
Embrace. So Embrace comes out. Like I said, we have 26 classes a quarter at Stanford, 800 students here. The Embrace class is in a class called Extreme Affordability, or just Extreme if you're an insider. So it's a 2-quarter course. Again, students from all over the university, from all kinds of different departments, they come together, and the professors that's the hard part. The professors are from different parts, and they really have trouble getting along, because
Well, that's not what universities are for.
Yeah.
Professors talking to professors.
Yeah, their
in
professors are
different
like
departments.
winning Nobel Prizes and going really deep. They're not supposed to talk to anybody else. But anyway, so we've broken that mold, and they're there. So Embrace. So Embrace goes out. In fact, there's a PBS special about Embrace that's just out. I got Ralph King. I forget what it's called, but it's been on PBS, and it follows one of the teams. The funny thing about journalism I didn't understand was they had to pick which team to follow. They didn't know which team was going to be good, right? And they had to follow a team, right? So it was pretty interesting. And so they go out and they're looking at hospitals, and they see incubators, and they get fascinated with incubators. And one of the things that fascinates them is these incubators cost about they're in India, and one of these incubators costs about $20,000 a piece, and they're empty. So they got a few incubators, they're empty. Yet there's close to 1 million babies a year dying, right? That could use an incubator. So what's the deal? Well, anyways, you again are need finding, and you reframe the problem. They go away from incubators to like, how do you keep these babies alive out in the remote villages, right? And so you go there, and anyways, make a long story short, these kids who were going to take perfectly good jobs as McKinsey partners and other things, that Stanford people do, they quit their jobs, and they decide this is too important, and so they start doing this thing that's it's called like a sleeping bag that has a paraffin in it, and you heat it under hot water, and then it turns out that the babies, who have this low birth weight, if you can keep them warm for the first X number of months of their lives, they survive, right? And so I think they just passed 50,000 babies. They saved 50,000 lives so far. But it's just a bunch of Stanford students that quit their jobs and said this is important. But it's the feeling that they have of that kind of bravado of we did this, like it wasn't clear where to go, it wasn't obvious, and we just stuck with it and moved to India. And I just saw a couple of them come back, which is a hardship in itself, and we're doing this, and so lots of prototypes. They had a bunch of like I saw all the prototypes. This thing that's kind of made out of plastic. It didn't work, and this thing, and I'll tell you one story. So. When they first started out, you can't improve these products or any services without the kind of visceral being there and trying them out. So if you just kind of think you're so smart that you can come up with the product, that's a really bad way to go. And so they do these products, and so that's really cool. So the product comes out, and it's got this thermometer on it, so that you can figure out how hot to make the thing before you put the baby, safe for the baby. So they go out, and it says, heat this, and they got this thermometer. It says heat to 100 degrees. I think it's 100 degrees. Heat to 100 degrees, whatever it says. And they go back, and they're not working. And they go back, and all this observation. They go back into the field, and they're not working. They can't figure it out. And it turns out, so they finally figured it out. The woman says to them, yeah, well, Western medicine is so powerful that I only heat it up to 70 degrees. They said 100, but Western medicine is so powerful that I don't want to risk it, so I only heat it to 70 degrees, which is not enough, right? So it's really easy to do on the product. You just change where it says 100, you write okay instead of 100, and say, heat it up until it's okay.
When you look back at the beginning of your career at early IDEO, and you were already on this path, but without the experience that you have now, what were the things that you didn't understand yet then?
What do you mean?
About this methodology? What were the I'm sure it became refined over time, and
Yeah.
you discovered things. What hadn't you figured out yet at that point?
Well, I really hadn't figured out. So I was an engineer, right?
Yeah.
So I hadn't figured out the power of this. As an engineer, it was kind of messy to go into people's homes or to convene a bunch of people who cared about this. We're redesigning the experience in Kaiser Hospital and like going in there and talking to the nurses and hearing about all things that are wrong in their lives. And, it's just like, it's messy, right? And so, I mean, I didn't really understand the power of really feeling empathy for the person you're trying to solve. Once you get over that line, I mean, you can't stop these teams once they, we're doing a big project in Peru for the kids. If you go there and spend some time with the Peruvian kids and see how bad their education is, you can't help yourself, right? The motivation doesn't come from, I don't see it ever come from making money or like coming up with cool ideas of products and stuff. The most powerful motivation for all these teams comes from empathy for these people, and how can we do something that's going to actually impact them, right?
I mean, for people who are listening and wondering, am I a creative person? Is he talking about me? What are some things that they can try to explore that part?
Well, they are a creative person, but unfortunately, I'm not sure even reading this silly book is going to help you. You have to take action, right? I think it's the same question as how do you get on a diet? I mean, it's like it's the same question as where do you find the wherewithal to do something differently? I can tell you one thing that's really worked for us. In the book, there's a discussion about double delivering. So you're in a company, and I get so many letters from people. I work in this lumbering company in Midwestern United States, and my boss is never going to let me do this, and it's hopeless and stuff. So, but they write that the concept of double delivering has worked, which is you have a problem, you have to do it the way the boss wants it. He or she has expectations, and you have to decide to deliver on those expectations, or it's not going to help you with your career, right? So you have to do that. But you're a young person and you're eager and stuff, then you use some of the methods we talk about by going out and meeting users and building a prototype. I mean, and then you kind of double deliver. So you deliver in the way they're expecting, and you have this other thing. And they report that they go to meetings with prototypes, and everybody else has got like a yellow pad with a pencil, and they have a prototype, and the whole meeting is about their prototype once they show up, right? Because they've done that. And so I think there are ways to lower you don't risk your career, and you try some of this stuff, and pretty soon the company starts to notice that you're like more creative than the average bear, and not that they give you a better job, but like you start to get little projects. You throw the holiday party because you're such a creative person. You should have ideas, and pretty soon, after they give you a bunch of projects that are not core to the company, then they end up. A lot of them end up moving into positions where they're doing creative work. So,
well, I'm sure people in the audience have questions. It would be great to give them a chance to ask some.
Great. Okay, so I have a microphone. Who's got a question? Raise your hand. I have 1,000 questions. Okay. Well, come on up. Here we go. First one is over here.
Simple and quick. What size Post-its do you use?
We use. Where's Christine? Right there. 4x4, 3x3. 3x3.
And here's the next one.
Good question.
I was just wondering, is there a difference between the way you cultivate creativity with kids versus adults? Because my life involves trying to do both.
Kids, it's more ingrained in adults. I mean, it's harder in adults because like with kids, we go into kids, I do a lot of work in K-12, and we go in, even kids that are above this age that's 9 years old, and you say, okay, we're going to start out today by doing improv. Or, the kids say, okay, and some of them kind of shuffle and look at their feet, but they'll eventually enter in because if you go to a group of CEOs, which we have a lot of them, and you say, we're going to start this by doing improv, most of them pull their BlackBerries out of their pocket and say, I got a really important call, I got to go. It's like we said, you're going to sing karaoke naked in front of the group. They just can't handle it, right? So in that sense, you have a much better chance with the kids to open them up. But the kids respond even more. My experience, I don't know, I don't study this, to building. If you can get the kids, so we got a bunch of kids that are not enjoying this or not resonating with it. We take a couple of teachers, open up their classrooms during lunchtime, and then make it into a builder experience. They come in, and they make things with glue guns, and they redesign their chairs, and and so I find that kids will, even though they're a little bit concerned about what the other kids will think of them in some of the cerebral stuff and the kind of lesson stuff, the maker thing seems to work with kids faster than adults. Adults still won't get down on their hands and knees and cut cardboard where kids will. So the difference is the adults, you have to hold their hands a little longer and they're a little harder to flip, but the kids still have the problem that they've opted out of being creative, but they respond to the physical really quickly.
Next question over on your right.
A question about where your design problems come from. Do they come to you, or do you look out at the world and decide for yourself what you'd like to work on?
I wish we were so proactive that we just worked on things that we dreamed up. But as a business, you want to do things that are other people's, that fit other people's strategic intent. And so I would say most of our projects come from companies that have an issue and they want to come up with an innovative idea in their marketplace, and they having trouble doing that. Having said that, most of the people that I get involved with, I'm the chairman of the company, so I don't get to do all that much. But if the trend right now is that CEOs of companies, big companies, important companies, are realizing that they have a cultural problem, that they need to be able to innovate routinely, that they have to have a culture that allows for this flexibility. And so more and more they come to us and say, well, we would like to, have you look, do an innovation audit, find out what we're doing, and help us with a cultural change to a company that's more fluid and that comes up with ideas more easily. And so those are really interesting projects. We do quite a few where we just become interested. We're very interested in K-12, and we're very interested in health on our own. So we are proactive about going out and getting those. We're also very interested in aging. I think that has something to do with what age we are getting to be.
Next question is up here on your left.
Hi, thanks. So a lot of the great examples you gave have to do with the physical or tangible experiences. Do your techniques differ for more software-based experiences?
No, I mean, again, I'm going to sound like I'm, this is my religion or something, and I believe it works on everything. I mean, I'm not thinking it'd work in politics, for instance. Of course, what would work in politics, I don't know. But yeah, we have a digital lab. We do lots of digital stuff. Our stuff works the best when there's a human in the loop that their desires or what's valuable to them is not understood, or that there's a new way of looking at what's important to them that results in innovation. So it really doesn't matter what it is. So we look at checking into the Mayo Clinic or checking into the Marriott Hotel, or a piece of software that's for kids. Oh, I got to tell that. So one of my favorite projects at IDEO is called Elmo's Calling. I don't know if you know this product. If you have kids at Sesame Street age, you might know it. But we noticed that kids so you're looking for funny behavior. So one of the things we noticed, we watched and we were observing something else. We noticed that parents are handing their young kid, 2-3-year-old kids, this very expensive device to babysit them, like on airplanes and stuff. And like, that's really weird behavior. You wouldn't give your kid like the Ming vase to play with, right? So why are you giving them this thing? Anyways, and so we got that, and so we started that. We have lots of apps for this. We have a big relationship with Sesame Street, and we jointly develop apps. But this is really still on topic, believe it or not. The software. So we designed an app for Sesame Street called Elmo's Calling. Best-selling app in this, hundreds, millions of downloads for Elmo. So here's how it goes. Your kid's there, crying, needs to be entertained. You hand him your cell phone. A few seconds later, the phone rings. And there's a little picture of a phone, and you answer it, and it's Elmo. and it's FaceTime. So you're the little picture at the bottom, and then Elmo's picture. And you could see the look on the kid's face. Elmo's calling me? Right? And then, but here's what makes the app the bestseller. The parent can program the app so that Elmo's talking about stuff like bedtime or eating or potty training. Right? Anyway, so we think if it applies to Elmo, it's got to apply to everything.
Next question's right here in the middle.
Yeah, so the mind map you mentioned, this is something which Tony Buzan popularized, or this is something of your own?
I'm sure. I don't think we come up with anything, new to the world. I learned it in school. I was an electrical engineer, and I made lists when I was trying to come up with ideas, right? Just lists. And somebody showed me this technique. One of the professors showed me this technique, and we've just used it ever since. But it's really a way of idea generation. Then you can make your list afterwards. I go back and make a list, right? So, yes, we've come up with lots of ideas. I'm teasing, but that one is I don't know what the origins are. You probably look it up, but what we've made it the predominant way that you start to come up with ideas as an individual tool. Brainstorming with the Post-it notes is the team approach to coming up with ideas. But another technique talking about individual, one of the things I've seen most powerful in this thing is that this whole notion that it comes out of you. I remember I worked at Boeing for a while, and I went to my boss and I said, I'm having trouble with this, can you help me? And he said, you're just going to have to go back to your cubicle and work harder. I'm thinking, I'm not sure, even as a kid, I could tell that's not going to help me. The one of the notions I've had this is like a new idea in the last year for me, which is the whole idea of a personal advisory board, right? So now I have this personal advisory board, and so I have to go to an important meeting. I have a strategy meeting on the 15th of March, right? So I convene my personal advisory board on the 13th of March. Right? These are friends of mine that have agreed to help me. And they're not at IDEO, and they're all over the place, and they come, and we sit down, and we work on my problem, right? And so, it's like cheating. Like, when I go to the meeting on the 15th, I've got 5 people's ideas. And I'm standing there, holding my cards, and I got so many ideas, I can't stand it, right? And so I think that, that turning it from an individual sport to a team sport. Now, the good news is I'm on their advisory boards, and they work at, the Bank of America or whatever. And so when they got a meeting coming up, I go and I'm on their advisory board. So I really believe in this multiple brains on the problem. And that's what's so powerful about IDEO. We got, 650 people who are all, capable of helping each other come up with ideas. And at a place like IDEO, if you send out an email to all IDEO and asking for something, man, you get a lot of responses right away. And it's not because they're not selfish. I mean, they have other things to do. It's just that they know if you put out an all IDEO email, you got a problem. You really want some help, right? And so you drop what you're doing to help them because you want that to be the case that if you send out the all IDEO email, that they're going to help you. So that is the motivation to help somebody who's in need.
So David, this is Lenore. I'm way up top, and I'm going to start my own personal advisory board, and I'd like you to be the first member. And here's a question.
Hello, Mr. Kelley. This is Della, and we are a graduate student in design from UC Davis. So our biggest challenge is right now to convince other disciplines in our school to work with us. As a designers, a lot of them don't trust us. So I was wondering, what is your solution or your method to convince other people to join? Thank you.
It's funny. It's funny you bring that up because you can imagine, well, if you have read it all about the success of the D School, it's uncanny. And so what I get is a lot of professors calling from other universities saying, you know, thank you very much. You know, my dean wants us to have a D School of our own, and you know, I've always wanted to have something like that, but you know, now that Stanford's done it, we can do it. And I thank you very much. And he said, but I seem to have trouble getting the faculty to work together. And so it's true, it's the hardest part. It's not that I'm anti-faculty, they're wonderful people, but they don't have any muscles in working collaboratively. Their whole lives have been, in their lab with their graduate students, like trying to dig a very deep hole, to some really, a Nobel Prize, something, really narrowly, and it's a distraction. It's a zero-sum game in their minds, and any time I spend on something that's not about, depth is a distraction and is not going to help me win my Nobel Prize, right? So it's very hard to get them to work together. So all I can say is that however you get them to do it, once they do it, it's so exciting to them, especially if they haven't been in a collaborative situation. So we have faculty that are in their 80s, high 70s and 80s, that they're not going to retire because this is the time of their lives, because they've enjoyed watching those kids' eyes light up when you see them, go to this point of creative confidence is just worth the price of admission. So they're all doing it. So I'll tell you a story. So when I started the D School, I just basically went around and found all the edgy favorite professors in different departments who were willing to play. And you have to have tenure, by the way. I can't recruit anybody who doesn't have tenure because it will ruin their tenure case to hang out with us. So, they have to have tenure, and because that's about depth again. And so we do it. So get together and try to do it. And the students love to watch because the faculty fight all the time. So the students love to watch the fights. And some student eventually says, "Who's doing the grading?" Because they've been so used to a sage on stage, a professor in the front, and they're trying to please that professor. Now when you got three people who are disagreeing with each other, which one do you go with? Which one do you suck up to with your answer? If they're all disagreeing. And so it took a long time. I brought a lot of people, practitioners. The answer to the question is probably you bring practitioners in from the outside to teach the classes alongside of the regular faculty, and then if the regular faculty see its power, and then you can over time you can remove the adjunct faculty and stick with the regular faculty if that's what you want to do. In my case, it really didn't work very well for a long time. Some of the faculty still don't speak to me, really. And so one of the things we did was hire a full-time psychiatrist. But that's not, but the de-shrink, but the interesting thing is, that, but I learned something very interesting, and now it costs me a lot less because it turns out that nobody acts badly in front of a psychiatrist. So what you do, if you got you got a meeting and there's a nasty faculty member that's coming that you think might think, you invite the de-shrink with you, and you bring this white Julian Garatsky, you bring this white-haired person with you into the meeting, and he doesn't say anything. I mean, he's like, nobody acts badly. So he never sees bad behavior because that's who he is. So my next step, I'm going to hire a guy that looks like him, who's a lot cheaper. If he's not going to do anything, I'm not,
Next question is in the first row. So I'm asking on behalf of this young gentleman. Sure. Are you sure? Okay. The question is, I want to build a laser, but my dad says it's too hard, so what should I do?
You got to figure out the laser. A laser's not that important. Like, what are you going to do with the laser, right? So if you figure out what you're going to do with the laser, then you can do something halfway to a laser. By the way, lasers are really inexpensive. I mean, I have one on my Swiss Army knife, and there's one that when you point a picture at the thing, so you can get a laser pretty easily. But you got to figure out what you want to do with it. A laser, you can, if you just want to fool around with a laser, I'll bet you can get one really inexpensively. But if you want to do something useful with it, like, burn a hole to China, then we got to talk about what.
So he's been so generous with his time, and we have so many questions. I'm just going to take one more, and then we'll adjourn. I know there's like 15 hands up. What am I going to do? So we'll take one last question over here, and then we'll adjourn to some book signing and some cookies, and then we're going to have to go home. But I thank you very much. Here.
Hi, David.
Hi.
So you're very inspiring. I've loved hearing you talk tonight, and I love the notion of thinking and coming up with so many ideas and brainstorming and spending so much time. And I feel like when I get creative, I could keep going and pushing and pushing and pushing. And then I have the reality set in of a budget that I'm working under and how much time I have to give. And I'm wondering how you approach that and how you make it all work at the end of the day for your clients and for you.
Doug and I were just talking about this in the green room back here. I'm going to let him answer that question too. Maybe we got time. But so I'm not very financial, right? And so there's all these constraints that I'm missing because you want to do ideas that are this tension between stuff that's extraordinary and that's sustainable, right? And so you kind of have to wear both hats. I can't do that very well, so I hire somebody else that I can get along with who can be that foil, right? You go back and forth. So again, we're back to the team, right? So having wild ideas is really fun when somebody can, I really like having constraints. I mean, because I've learned that those constraints on top of my ideas result in something that's going to make impact in the world. Whether just the wild ideas don't seem to go anywhere. But this guy's just gone through. Why don't you tell us the story of how you go from nothing to a magazine?
Well,
we were just talking. He's just gone through this exact thing.
I mean, it would be a long story, but what I can say is that if somebody wants to give me an unlimited budget and unlimited time, I will immediately take back everything that I'm about to say. But until that happens, starting Pop-Up Magazine, growing Pop-Up Magazine, starting the California Sunday Magazine, so much of it happened not because of tons of resources, but because of constraints and having to be clever about them.
It's a positive.
Yeah.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in thanking David Kelley and Doug McGray. Thank you so much for coming.